This is Karen with NewClevelandRadio.net, and it is time for How to Super Age with Elise Marie Collins. And last recording, I surprised Elise because I had been at the doctor's earlier that day, and on my doctor's bookshelf was her book. And it was like, do you know that author? And he goes, no. He says, but I like everything that's in this book. And I have to tell you, Elise, when I had my procedure this past weekend, he talked to me and he said, if the author of this book is really your friend, you have to talk to her about two things. Nutrition. Talk to her about what you're eating, even though you think it's nutritional, because I guarantee you're going to find out it's not. And he said, secondly, talk to her about sleep. Because if you don't get the right amount of sleep, you're not going to be breathing properly. So off record, I'm going to contact you. We're going to talk about nutrition and sleep, because you know what? I want to just age magnificently like Barbara Rose Brooker and all those who believe in living your best life. So tell us a little bit about your book before we get started, okay?
Okay, well, I think the book you're talking about, I'm going to reach for one of them. That's How, or Super Ager. We're learning how to super age. This is my book, and I'm thrilled that this doctor is reading it. It's just kind of magical, because sometimes when you write a book, you know, it goes out there and you're not sure who's reading it. Once in a while you get, excuse me, feedback, but to hear that it's on your doctor's bookshelf and that I do these podcasts with you, it's just kind of, my mind is exploding.
Right. Exactly.
So it's very exciting. I also wanted to mention I am writing a new add-on chapter to my first book, which is Chakra Tonics. Yes. And I'm really excited about it because I hadn't even really read the book in many years, but it's all about the chakras. So it's the mind, body, spirit connection. So you'll be hearing more about that in coming weeks. And it is available if you want to get it now. And we're going to be talking about different, all kinds of topics today. I'm so excited for our guest. I am a big fan of hers. I've met her in person, and we study from the same coach. A lot of the information, especially in Super Ager, the book Super Ager, was things that I learned from a coach that we know together, who's Kate Stillman, and she also wrote the foreword to Super Ager. And so I love that Amarylis combines the magical and the mundane. I'm going to read her bio, and then we'll get to that interview. So Amarylis is an Ayurvedic Health Counselor, Akashic Records reader, Reiki practitioner, prenatal yoga instructor, and best of all, a mother. Her message is to make your life your altar, that there is magic in the mundane, bliss in the banal, and the day is your dharma. She is a starseed and encourages other starseeds to remember they chose this life on planet Earth. Now ground into it and make the most of it. Enjoy it. I love that bio. It had so many things that I'd love to ask you about. Before we ask what is a starseed, maybe is there anything else you want to add about how you work with clients and students? Because I think we do similar things. And earlier in this podcast, Karen was talking about contacting me about sleep and nutrition. And as we both are working in the realm of Ayurveda, tell us a little more about how you work with people.
So it started working with Ayurvedic daily habits, and I started implementing those in my own life and saw profound results. And so that's how I discovered Kate Stillman and started going through her book. And I led a coaching program that went through these daily habits of things that just align you with natural rhythms, because we are nature. We're not separate from it, and saw significant results. Everybody there in this year-long program was just amazed at the transformation. And I guess beyond that, first and foremost, actually, is that it mattered. that these little daily things mattered, because some of them are so small that you don't realize the impact. You don't understand the significance. And so the mind says it's not big enough. So it must not really matter. And, they just saw a lot of transformation. And I ended up going on to study Ayurveda at California College of Ayurveda. And so I studied the deeper layers into why it matters and why it's so profound. So I was leading this program, and that was kind of the grounding and the rooting into these nature-based practices. But then it ended up taking me to a whole different level of subtle body practices, energy body practices, and opening up the world of spirit to me. And so that yogic teaching of root to rise really started to make sense. And, I'm not doing the program anymore, but I do work one-on-one with people to determine their dosha. And because some people are confused, they do the quiz, they're like, I feel like I'm that dosha, but it's saying that I'm this, so I'm kind of confused. Or I feel like I'm both, so what do I do? So I work one-on-one with people to help them really identify their dosha and how they can bring that into balance. And right now I'm in this transitional place where I'm putting my message out about how I live, because this way of an altered life is something that I embody and that I want to share, but I'm not quite sure how to teach that yet. And I also work with people, doing Akashic Record mini messages, which has just been so much fun. It's not like full readings. It's, I get their name and I open their Akashic Record and ask for the message that's needed in this time. And a message will come through and I share that message with them in a recording. And I'm just getting such great feedback from those messages. And it's a lot of fun for me. It's very meaningful. But right now I'm in a transitional place and how I'm working with people.
I love that. And I've gone through those phases myself. And I think just waiting and listening to the next message, and maybe sometimes a client or a student comes along and they need to work with you and they'll guide you to the next way of working, is what I found. And I'm sure you found that too. Maybe we could just back it up. I'm going to give my definition of what a dosha is, in case there's anyone listening who does not know what a dosha is. I always think of it, and if you're listening, you won't see my thumb. I'm holding up my thumb. It's like our fingerprint. We all have a fingerprint. And one thing about Ayurveda is that it's I want to say personalized medicine. There's a better word for it, but it is very personal to each one. Each person is different and unique. Precision medicine. So there's a movement even in Western medicine called precision medicine, where we, don't just give everybody the same medication, everybody the same one size fits all, but the ancient wisdom of Ayurveda is it's always to you and to your balancing profile. And the balancing profile is elements. It's all about the elements, and that goes with the chakras. So we won't bog your head too much with anything, but is there anything I missed in that dosha explanation that you want to highlight?
Nope, you hit it right on the head, is that it's individualized and you can't look at anybody else and what they're doing and expect the same results. It may or may not happen similar to that other person. But what I find is that there's a lot of people who are looking at somebody else and what they're doing, or a program or a book that says this way and it will change you in these ways. And they're like, but I didn't have that experience. And so, yes, absolutely. It's determined at birth. At the moment of conception, you have your doshas, your unique percentages of the doshas there. And it doesn't change throughout your life. That is your constitution. What does change is the imbalances throughout your life. And so that's what we work with, but you're never trying to get to that tri-doshic place where everything is completely even. You're working to get to your personal balance of the doshas.
Yeah.
Isn't that difficult in today's society when everything, all advertisement is about us trying to be like each other, look like Christy Brinkley, she's in her 60s and doesn't have a wrinkle, but so if you use her face cream, and that's some of the questions that I've been getting, especially on this podcast, that they love that there's all these alternatives, but they're also saying, well, why can't I do what my girlfriend does? Or why can't I eat like my husband does? And it's like, we're all unique. That's why.
Yeah, for me, I like to keep it simple and have people not think of all those choices, but what would be the next easiest one for them. And I'm sure Amarylis thinks the same way. So that's one of the things I've been working with clients, is guiding them to the next right action, rather than, because it's overwhelming. And if we get in that, go big. What BJ Fogg says, go big or go home. That's the mentality out there. And that's a very, in my opinion, detrimental to our health. So I don't know if you have any comments on that.
Absolutely. The go big or go home it's in a way, it's self-sabotage. It's kind of the subconscious, and all the things that we're not really aware of coming into play, saying it has to look this way based off of whatever information I've received, whatever I've decided. It has to look this way or be this way, or it's not the good way, it's not the right way. And what you were saying about the overwhelming aspect of all of this, there's so much coming out from so many people sharing what has worked for them, what is helpful, what is beneficial, what is life-changing. And you don't have to do this alone, and you don't have to figure this out on your own. So I always recommend going to an Ayurvedic practitioner or somebody else who specializes in Ayurvedic medicine, individualized medicine practices, and get your individual consultation about your physiology and what's going to work for you. Make that investment. You don't have to slog through all the things. You can go to somebody, and somebody can, from the outside, who's had that training, say, this is what works for you. These things are going to be beneficial for you, and then have an ongoing relationship with them, always touching base. We do this with astrology. Everybody's like, what's my reading? Like, who am I? Yeah. In terms of personalities, we're like, we'll invest in that because we want to know, and we know, oh, this is who I am. This is what works for me. This is how I show up in the world. These are my challenges and the positive things. But it's time that we kind of take that mindset and say, okay, well, my physical body, my health, and my way of navigating in this world, I want that kind of individualized, that person that can tell me exactly what's going on with me.
I love that. And I love the comparison to astrology, because that is so right on. Of course we want to know what's our sign, what's our, rising sign, and all kinds of different things. I don't know that much about astrology, and I don't know if you've had this experience, but sometimes people think I do because I talk about the moon and the stars, and I'm like, but I actually don't have any real knowledge of actual astrology. I just know that is continually influencing me, the moon cycle, the season, and things like that. And there are people that go deep into that too. And we would consult an astrologer, but we would think, oh no, I'm not going to pay for an individualized medical or medicine consultation because it's not covered by insurance. Often you may be able to find someone, but often it's not. I wanted to ask you about the Akashic Records, because I understand them, but I'd love to hear your explanation, and maybe just telling the listeners a little bit about the Akashic Records, and maybe tell us about the mini readings, because I love that. It's not overwhelming. It sounds just like almost like your daily horoscope.
Yes. So I had a dream once when I was very young. And I was in this library, like this huge etheric library. And there was a gentleman that walked in, and he opened a book in front of me. And I remember reading the word, and I woke myself up repeating the word because I was like, I have to remember this. I have to remember this. And I woke up saying ubiquitous, ubiquitous, ubiquitous. And I didn't know what that meant. I had no understanding. And so here it is, probably decades later. And I come across Ashley Wood, and she's an Akashic Records reader. And she has this really big podcast. Lots of people are learning about the Akashic Records through her programs and through her podcast, and starting to say, oh, there's this, what's considered to be a library. Some people see it like as a library, but essentially it is every soul has a recording of every single thing that's happened in every single lifetime, anywhere beyond space and time, wherever you are. And not just the actions and the things that you do, but the things that are felt, the things that are thought, every single, the subtlest vibrational experience that you have in whatever incarnation is recorded and stored there in the Akashic Records. And there are some people that say that the Akashic Records is housed in the Pleiades, the star constellation. Some people just feel like it's kind of like housed in the universe, to each their own, but that there is this vibrational record of your soul, and that you can open that and unlock that. So there's usually an opening prayer that you say. And, through listening to a lot of the people on Ashley's podcast and going through her program to learn how to open my Akashic record, you have to be ready for it, ready to receive it, ready to be open to it. Some people are so full of doubt. They're like, oh, no, and they're limiting themselves. But once you get to this place where you're able to open your Akashic record, you ask questions. And this is another big part where people get confused. They're like, I just open it, but why isn't stuff coming to me? It's because you have to ask a question. So it's like, I've heard it said, you can open Google and have it in front of you, but until you type something in and ask, you don't get a direction. So the first time that I went in, I had heard that it's the most profound experience that you'll usually have when you're in the records. And for me, it certainly was. I heard voices that were very excited. And I was just sitting in this experience, and it was almost like a kind of a portal opening up. And like whatever the top of this portal was, I could feel and hear voices saying, she's here, she's here, she's in. Mm-hmm. And a lot of them were saying, she's back, she's back. And I was like, oh, I don't know what that's about, but okay, because I've never been in the records. I don't understand what you mean by she's back. But they were so excited. And so I just sat in that field for a really long time. It was really heavy at first. It doesn't feel that way anymore, but the first time it felt like so much energy coming down that, I'd go for a walk and people must have thought I was completely stoned because it was just so heavy. I was like, ugh. And it was beautiful. It was amazing. It was profound. And so ever since then, I've been using the opening of my Akashic record to help guide and navigate in my life. And then also doing these mini messages. And I've noticed that the mini messages are much more popular because I ask the question, and it's very specific. What needs to be heard today? What needs to come through for this person's highest evolution on their personal path? And the message comes through. When I was doing full readings, a lot of the time people had trouble asking questions, or it was fortune telling questions like, if I don't get married to this person, who am I going to marry? Where am I going to retire? And what I've noticed in doing all these mini messages is that the messages don't come through and just tell you how to live your life. They don't come through and make decisions for you. And a lot of the questions that I was getting with the full readings were things like, well, what's going to be the end result of my life? What are the decisions that are going to be made? And the answer always is, well, it depends on the choices that you make today, and then tomorrow, and then tomorrow, and then tomorrow. Who knows? There's usually a likely outcome, but it shifts and changes depending on you and today and what you decide and how you choose to show up. So they've been a lot of fun. Some of them I really remember because it feels like it's something that I also need to soak in, this wisdom. And then most of the time they just kind of come through and then I forget them.
Maybe you could tell us some that you remember, but before that, I want to just underline what you said, because it's really reminding me of some of the reflection I've been doing personally as I go to write, add on to this first book I wrote. It was published in 2006. And if we think back, I haven't looked up Google, but I've thought about smartphones. That's when we started using smartphones. That's when, YouTube, I think, was started around that time. So many things have changed in technology. And what you were saying was kind of reminding me of how people adopted technology too, even with Google, like, what do I do? We didn't use the word Google before. And smartphones, some people just, I don't want to use those things. And there's still probably a few holdouts, but my parents who are in their 90s have smartphones. They don't use them the same way as my son. But, the way you were talking about the Akashic Records reminds me, because I'm also a gerontologist and work with older adults, trying to help them to get used to technology. It's almost the same thing. It's not, if we didn't grow up with technology, and probably if we didn't grow up in a culture that honors this idea of this wisdom is there, it's kind of mind blowing, because what you were saying is like, really, all that information, I don't have to be struggling. And that has been part of many cultures, indigenous cultures, and all over the world. That was something that perhaps shamans would know about. And maybe you can add on a little bit about that, but that's what came to mind, that it can be intimidating if we haven't ever heard about the Akashic Records. Just like remember the first time you looked at a smartphone, you're like, what are all these apps? So I don't know if you have any comments, or Karen has any comments, but and it also makes me think of the future, because we think what's happened in the last 15 years, what's going to happen as we go forward. I think we're going to need more and more of this way of looking at the world, because it is so overwhelming. There's so much information. And a lot of teachers I've been listening to have said, we need more consciousness, which is what the Akashic Records bring us.
Right. And it's also that individualized, personalized wisdom is, I have the answers that I need, and I have access to that. And I don't have to look outside of myself. When you know how to tap in, and it doesn't have to be opening your Akashic Records. Some people just have an incredibly honed in sense of intuition, not because they were gifted or blessed with that. Everybody has it, but because they listen and they honor and they respect it. So they know what they need to do, regardless of what the world is doing, regardless of what their family and friends have to say about it. They know for themselves, this is for me. This is my medicine for my heart, mind, body, soul.
I love that. And that was such a great point, because that's the simplicity and the listening. And it is a practice to listen. And that's something that I like to work with my clients on, listening to yourself, getting that information. And it's not always easy, because again, just like technology, you either maybe you're a digital native and you grew up with technology, or you are learning how to use technology. The same with things like Akashic Records. I believe everybody can learn to follow their intuition, but most of us didn't grow up in an atmosphere that encouraged that.
Right. It's
Well,
supportive.
And don't you think a lot of us grew up in a way that we expected people around us to tell us what we needed to do and how we needed to do it. And, we didn't stop and sit and ask ourselves, what's my next step? Instead, we would go to our parent, our sibling, our teachers and say, what do I do next? And I have found in the last 10 years, working with a number of coaches through podcasting, I learned something different from each one of them. And it's not that I have to sit here and absorb it and say, oh, that's what I'm going to do. It's how would I feel if I did that? Do I need that? And I think that's what people don't quite get, because we're still waiting for somebody to drop all those answers down from the sky so that we don't have to work at it.
Yes, that's really profound what you just said, is that most people are waiting to be told what to do. And so ultimately that just makes you a victim. You're not empowered in your own life because you didn't make the decision for yourself. And however things play out, I really feel like it comes down to self-empowerment and trusting ourselves, really trusting ourselves. And to speak to what you'd said earlier, it's not our fault. We got born into this world and programmed. So, there's no blame here. There's no self-flagellation like, oh, why couldn't I get this? We were born into these societies, these cultures, these paradigms that programmed us in this way.
Yeah.
But as we're waking up, as we're becoming adults, as this world is changing, it's our responsibility, despite whatever we were taught, however we grew up, to shift that.
I love that. And I feel like I know that I'm living this and learning this a lot with my parents, because they clearly grew up in a different paradigm and they're in their early 90s. And actually yesterday I came up with something funny, because they don't listen to me. They listen to their doctors. I mean, they'll sometimes listen to me. But for the most part. So I said to my dad yesterday, they're planning to go on a trip and they're going to need to do a lot of walking. And so I finally just said, well, I know a really good yoga teacher that can help you with some of your stretching and walking. And he just kind of laughs because he's waiting for his doctor. Sometimes my mom and I will say, well, you could get physical therapy because he hurt his back before the pandemic. And, but he doesn't ask the right questions, and he's very stubborn. I mean, the stubbornness got them to this point, I think, because they're very, they just have a certain way about them. They're like, we're going to do it. And that got them to this point in certain ways. So I can't say that you shouldn't be like that, because it got them to be 90 in a certain way, but we're always here to learn. So I would love to hear if you can remember a message, just a real quick message, so we could have a sampling, because people might be interested in your mini messages, and just to have a taste, if you can remember one. I'd love to hear what you got.
Yes. So they come through in all different ways. Sometimes it's just a download. All of a sudden, I call it like a zip file that just like dunk lands, and now I have to unzip it and like pull all the things out of it. Sometimes it comes through as visuals, which is mainly how it comes through now. It's interesting because it changed. When I first started opening the records, I would just like open my mouth and straight channel and speak. But then for whatever reason, I don't know, I think something about my mom's passing in May, all of a sudden it shifted and it's visuals now. Sometimes there's bodily sensations. So, or just like I hear a voice, there's nothing attached to it. It's just, I'm hearing a voice. So one that I did recently that could really speak to everybody, but I trust the messages that come through, even if it can could apply to anybody and everybody. Like, this is what this person really needs to hear. So it was, all of a sudden there was like, whew, I was like, what was that? And I thought, okay, what is this? And then there was kind of the visual of panning out, and I'm in this desert, and I look one direction, and there's a road, and it goes off into the horizon. And then I look this direction, it goes off into the horizon. And I'm thinking, okay, so what is this visual? I always have to ask, what does this mean? And the message that came through was, you don't want to miss it, because something had flown by. I was like, okay, miss what? And the message that came through was, you don't want to miss this life. You're so busy right now that you're missing the small, juicy bits of life. You're missing the little details that really bring deep soul level contentment, because you're in this busyness and you're missing it. You're missing it, and you don't want to miss it. So that was really the overarching message, was you don't want to miss it. So it went on into details about how, this person can really savor and slow. But then also the message came through that I was asking, why is there this desert? Is it like a dry, barren life here? And it's to say, no, it's just the expanse of open space. And you get to create your life. You make this, but it starts as this beautiful, open, wide open space. And that seeing this kind of road from end to end, horizon to horizon, was that span of a lifetime, from birth to death. And it was very powerful how it was shown, how it was explained, and the message that came through. And I just thought, I have to remember this. I have to remember this, because I also don't want to forget this image, this message of, you don't want to miss this. You don't want to miss it.
Wow, I love that. And it's reminding me too, I don't know if anyone listening or any of you today have been to Burning Man. I only went once in early on. It's been going on for many, many years, but Burning Man is in the desert. And it's like that. You can see for miles and miles, but this crazy city just pops up. Like you said, like it's your lifetime. And I love this for how to super age, because that message is like the perfect message for us, because we're going from birth to death. And that is really what we learn. It's not just about gerontology, and aging is not just about the end of life, but how we've lived life before. But I think we always have that opportunity to not miss, to be in this moment, to appreciate that. And yesterday was my birthday, and I feel like I was talking to my stepdaughter. Yeah, we're both Pisces. Speaking of astrology.
Yeah, double Pisces here. I'm always living in this world of like spirit. Yeah, I feel you.
I love it. And I was talking to my stepdaughter was saying, yeah, well, technology has gotten us more productive, but we're just busier and busier. And we were both kind of musing on that. So I'm going to share this message with her. It's a very profound message. I love it. Right.
And something that's also coming up over the past year for me is that the technology isn't bad. It's how we use it. It's how we implement it. It's our own judgments about it. And so if we think that it's bad or wrong or creating problems, then we're going to perpetuate this. Technology isn't going to slow down. It's going to get faster. And recently I started doing Kundalini yoga. And one of the teachings of one of their teachers was that in this age, and this was said, decades ago, maybe in the 60s, is that there was going to be a massive psychic pressure on the planet because of technology. And not that that was bad, but that was what's happening. It's for our evolution, it's for our advancement, I don't think it would be here if it wasn't meant to be here. And, there's bigger pictures that I have with that. But that the psychic pressure of this technological age was going to break a lot of people if you couldn't keep up, if you couldn't stay with it. And I think we see that in a lot of ways. People having, mental, emotional, physical breakdowns over technology, or just demonizing it and saying, I wish it would go away. I wish it would go away. Instead, I'm seeing it like, I love it. I don't speak poorly about my iPhone at all. I love it. And I love social media because I've learned how to use it in my own life. And so I'm looking at this as I grow and age. I know that technology also will be advancing and getting faster. Accelerating, advancing and accelerating. And I need to keep up with this.
Ooh, I love
Not
that.
just from a how to use
Yes.
and know the apps and things, but like energetically and psychically, I need to keep up with what's happening on the planet.
Yeah.
Well, and don't you think that these technology elements today are similar to the beginning of the 1900s when, telephones started being used? It's like, that had to have been a strange phenomenon, but there was a need for it, and people started seeing that need. And radio and TV and all the things that came early on before us, probably for our parents. But on the weekend, I do training in a big box store for the representatives to actually know how to sell technology to all age groups.
Mm.
And we will get older people coming in saying, I hate it, but I need it. And I usually just ask them, what do you hate about it? Just one thing. I don't want to know the 10 million things, but the one thing. And it's usually they don't even know how to turn it on or hook it up. And that's why they hate it. And so giving them something very simple and showing them. And I loved how you talked about the records being similar to Google. When you want to know something, you Google it. And
You ask, right?
Yeah. In the past, we would ask our next door neighbor, or we'd go to an encyclopedia and look it up. But now we've got this electronic, piece of equipment that goes off into somewhere, and we accept those answers. But there are people who will say, well, Amarylis, how can you tell me that you're getting this download? Well, because it's all out there. There's an energy force, and it's inside of us. We're waking it up when we're accepting those messages.
Absolutely. And for me, they could ask, how do I know? Because I know. And I don't have to justify it to you or to anybody. And I think when we really get to that place of trusting inner knowing or what's right for me or how I'm guided, everybody has that experience. Everybody understands what it feels like to know for themselves. And, even when others say otherwise. And so I've been really quiet these past few years as things have been kind of opening up, because it's been my experience and me settling into my own experience for myself so that I don't have to justify it to anybody or convince anybody or show anybody. And if anybody questions it, I'm just like, absolutely. However you see it, think it, feel it, believe it, that's for you. That's perfect for you. We're giving information, we're sharing experiences, but it's mine and mine alone, and yours is for you. And so I don't ask or demand that you accept any of this. If you're like, oh, the Akashic Records, and I don't know, that sounds crazy. Guess what? I used to be in that place also. So I completely understand, because when all this started happening, I went to an energy healer It was actually for a pelvic floor issue. And she happened to be a profound energy healer, which I didn't realize at the time. It was after my daughter was born. And I remember her saying something that was really woo-woo. And at that very moment, it was like two selves appeared. And there was one that was like, what she just said is so profoundly true in your soul, and you know it. And then there's the other part of me that was like, that's weird. No. That like, if I believe that, I'm gonna be weird, and that kind of sounds crazy, and I don't know if I want that, so there was that was the fracture. But before that point, it was always like, oh, that's weird, that's so I get it, I understand.
Thank you so much for that. That was powerful. I've had similar experiences, and I'm sure many listening or watching can totally relate. And what you just said is really helpful for the aging process, because we often do, if we haven't explored these ideas of, something beyond just our physical, something that consciousness, however we experience it, like you said, all of it is valid, and validate yourself. Take in what you can, even from this podcast. And because I believe that your intuition is going to help you age well, because it's going to help you know what's best for you, right? So just to wrap it up, we've had such a great interview. I want to stay here, but we'll have to have you back again.
Yes.
Maybe you could just leave us with anything else that might help our listeners age well, and at any stage, because we're always aging from birth on, we're aging. Anything else you've want to underline about aging well?
From what I've seen in cultures and indigenous places and peoples, and it ties in with Ayurveda, that when you get into these golden years, that's the Vata time of life. And with that dosha of Vata, you have that connection to ether and to spirit. There's a lightness of being, and that this is where the wisdom of the elders comes into play. And we've heard this from traditions, that the elders hold the wisdom, and they're really tapping into life wisdom, life lived, but also wisdom that they can probably now attune to in a different way, because they're not busy doing the day and creating and managing the life. And I want that I live in a way that helps me get to this place, so that as I grow older, I'm getting wiser, because I want to have and carry the wisdom of the elders to pass down. I don't want to be an elder who is struggling with so much unprocessed emotion and trauma, with a little t and capital T, so much dis-ease in my life, so much disease in my life, that I can't bring in the wisdom. So that's how I'm living my life, is working with today, so that today is the best day for me, my body, my mind, my heart, my soul, so that down the road, I continue to get wiser and wiser and wiser for myself and for generations to come.
Wow. That, ladies and gentlemen, all genders and sexual preferences, is how to super age.
Absolutely. What a terrific podcast today. I can't thank the two of you enough. I have to admit, I come into Elise's podcast wanting to learn, wanting to absorb. And sometimes, I listen to the information, I go, oh, that is too woo-woo for me. And I have to sometimes go back and listen again. And sometimes I say it again, and sometimes I don't. When you first started out, I thought, I'm not going to connect to this. But the more you were talking, I just felt myself opening up. And, that's all we can ask of our listeners, because I feel so much lighter now than I did 45 minutes ago. So a special thank you to both of you.
Thank you. Thank you for this opportunity to be here with you both, and to everybody who is watching and listening.
Well, check out the show notes. You'll be able to know how to find Elise and Amarylis. And please feel free to contact them, because I'll tell you something, aging beautifully, let's all super age together. Have a great day. Bye-bye now.
Yeah.